Thank you very much for joining us this evening for this panel discussion. We're actually very fortunate to have a group of 5 CEOs of some amazing growth companies in Canada that's below the radar. We've assembled a group of these CEOs that have different ranges of companies that they manage, but they bring collectively a group of stories and insights into the opportunities in investing in healthcare in Canada that is seldom ever exposed. You know, we know of all the popular themes that are out there, but I think that today we're actually going to be very fortunate to have these, to get into the minds of some of these CEOs that are going to present here. So I invite these CEOs to come up. So you've got Andrew from SQI Diagnostics, you've got Cameron from Microbix, we've got Dr. Elliot Goldstein from ProMIS Neurosciences, we've got Robert Tessarolo from Cipher Pharmaceutical, and we've got Roberto Bellini from Bellus Health. Gentlemen, kindly come up. So these CEOs have a very unique responsibility, and unlike many Fortune 500 companies where they have an enormous pool of capital available to them or an enormous number of resources available to them, they actually have to juggle a considerable number of responsibilities. They have to be adept at molecular biology. They have to navigate through the hurdles of clinical trials. They have to deal with a hostile regulator that many industries don't have to in software or hardware. They have to network in order to secure partnerships to support their pipeline of products. They have to deal with dead ends. So they will go to the ends of the earth to secure partnerships and so on, and then ends up being a dead end. So they have to navigate through all this. They have to stamp out bushfires. They have to deal with trial failures. They have to constantly be tapping the market for funding for their clinical phase products. But we're actually very fortunate because the group of CEOs that you get to hear from today have important insights and considerable successes in this field. So why even invest in this sector? Well, I think the #1 reason is all of these CEOs are, as healthcare CEOs, investing in a virtuous industry. The #1 priority is that they are involved in the business of saving lives or improving the quality of lives of patients. That is a fundamental difference to many other sectors that are out there. The second thing is there are enormous rewards for shareholders that risk capital to invest in these companies. For example, Dr. Elliot Goldstein is the CEO of ProMIS Neurosciences. We first invested in ProMIS back in the summer of 2015 at 3 cents. They were doing a financing to restructure the company and focus on Alzheimer's research based on the insights of Dr. Neil Cashman out of UBC. We invested at 3 cents. Today the stock trades at 60 or 70 cents. So we have a 20 or 30-fold increase in return on capital. And that leads us to the fundamental aspect of why invest in healthcare, because the returns are asymmetric, meaning that you will have along the way disappointments where these companies decline 50, 60, 70% on a clinical trial failure. But you also have many companies that actually generate enormous returns of hundreds and hundreds of percent, like ProMIS or like Theratechnologies. We invested in Theratechnologies at around 50 cents. The stock is about $8 today. And again, it took about 3 years, as it did with ProMIS. But if you're patient enough the market will ultimately value your company at a fair market value. Well, all the CEOs that are here today represent tremendous value. And that's why we have selected these companies, because we think that the opportunity to invest in them is timely. We think that what they bring to market is extraordinary, and that we're actually quite fortunate to hear from these CEOs. But to know why, where we are at this point in time, I think it's important to understand a bit of the history of where we came from. So back in the 1990s, there was a wave of successful companies. So we had small companies such as Biochem Pharma, BioVale, Angiotech, QLT Therapeutics that went from market caps of several hundred million to multi-billion-dollar companies. And they all innovated extraordinary drug companies that saved thousands and perhaps millions of lives. We're fortunate today to have companies that are involved in the same endeavor and to see them at these very early stages. In the 2000s, we saw many Canadian biotech companies acquired by European and pharma companies. Companies like Allelix, Aspreva, Cangene, YM Biosciences. Many companies that were acquired by other companies that understood the value of these companies. In the 2010s, we saw a bit of a departure from the sector where it went away from R&D-based innovation towards earnings momentum companies, such as companies that acquired other companies because the cost of credit was fairly cheap, and it was an earnings momentum game, and that's ended. But that brings us to now. So again, we've assembled an extraordinary group of CEOs. So on the far right, we've got Roberto Bellini, who is the CEO of Bellus. His dad was actually Francisco Bellini, who was the CEO of Biochem Pharma. So if you go back 25 years, when I became a portfolio manager at RBC Capital, the first biotech investment I ever made was in Roberto's dad's company, Biochem Pharma. What's exceptional about that company is that how I invested in that company is in 1994, I went to a TD luncheon where Francisco presented Biochem Pharma, and he said that 3TC, which would be a breakthrough therapy for HIV, would generate $400 million in sales. Everyone in the room laughed. With that skepticism, I phoned the Glaxo analyst in the UK, and I said, Francisco just said this. What does Glaxo think that this drug could do? And he said, Glaxo thinks this drug could do over $500 million in sales. So Francisco is actually quite conservative. So my first investment as a portfolio manager at RBC was to buy Biochem Pharma. That stock went up fivefold over the next 5 years, and it saved thousands and tens of thousands of lives because of this breakthrough drug 3TC. Next to Roberto is Andrew Morris. He's the CEO of SQI Diagnostics. They develop multiplexing technology that has biopharma, giant biopharma companies as its client base. It spent 2017 validating its technology. We're looking at a hockey stick type generation of revenue over the next couple of years. It's a platform technology, amazing. I think we're all very fortunate to be exposed to what SQI Diagnostics is doing. Next to Andrew is Cameron Groom. He just became the CEO of Microbix. Again, we're looking at a rapid increase in revenue over the next few years from what's going on at Microbix. They've just gone from a roller bottle technology to 1 bioreactor to 6 bioreactors to meet increasing demand and expanding product profile. Its market cap is an absolute song compared to what its growth opportunities are. Next to Cameron is Dr. Elliot Goldstein, who is the CEO of ProMIS Biosystems. Again, who I mentioned earlier on, we invested at 3 cents back in 2015. It's now up 20 or 30-fold from where we invested in. And they have understood that Biogen has the leading drug for Alzheimer's disease called aducanumab. And they have figured out different variations as to how that drug can be improved and what the mechanism of action behind Alzheimer's disease. This is very, very important. So it has seen, from when we invested, its market cap go from 5 million to about 150 million. That's a market recognizing, finally, its technology. Such opportunities will be available to investors in many of these other companies. Next to Dr. Goldstein is Robert Tessarolo, who's just become the CEO of Cipher Pharmaceutical over the past year. Cipher trades at 5 times enterprise value to EBITDA. That is an absolute steal. This is a company that took not 1, not 2, but 3 products through to FDA approval. It had an initial misstep prior to Robert where it expanded into US. Robert came in, divested that product portfolio, and focused the company back to its core operations. Extremely profitable. It's going to earn probably around 40 cents this year, probably 50 or 60 cents in 2018. Robert has a short list of products that it's going to be in licensing that will step up the earnings momentum in the next few years. An amazing value for Cipher Pharmaceutical. So now I would like to have each of these CEOs perhaps spend some time describing their business, describing what their focus is, and introduce themselves to you. Roberto?
Thanks for the intro, Eden. I'm not sure if it was an intro for me or my dad, but anyway, I think that you got it right. My background is from a family office that invests in the biotech space. What we're really, really good at is finding early stage projects, early stage ideas, developing those through clinical studies, and eventually selling them to big pharma companies. We did that with Biochem Pharma, right, in the it just sold in 2001 in a very successful transaction with Shire. We've also done that in the Hep C space with another company that was sold for $500 million in 2009. We've recently sold another company earlier this year out of the family office where we've also done very well in. The project I'm involved in directly right now, so at Bellus Health. Bellus Health is a publicly listed company on the Toronto Stock Exchange. I'm the CEO of the company. We've just started a new project that we've in-licensed earlier this year, not this year, early in 2017, so just under 12 months ago. And what we're really trying to solve here with this project is chronic cough. So, I mean, probably a lot of you know, just coughing from getting a cold. Chronic cough is defined as a cough that lasts for longer than 8 weeks. This is a big problem for patients that have this condition. Causes a lot of physical pain for patients. They're coughing 30 to 50 times per hour. A lot of them can't sleep, bothers their spouse. For me, the bigger issue is actually more of an interaction with people problem. A lot of these patients have trouble having conversations. They have trouble dealing with clients. They have trouble going on dates or going to the theater. So obviously a big impact on their quality of life. It's a big problem also in the number of patients. So chronic cough is about 10% of patients in, adult patients in developed markets. So like in the US, there's about 26 million patients with chronic cough. But more importantly, there's a subsector of those, so about 10% of the 10%, 2.5 million patients that have no therapies. Like there are no options for these patients. They have long-standing refractory chronic cough. They can have this for years. These patients have no options. This is really where the market opportunity is. It's a huge potential multi-billion-dollar market. We have a competitor that's trying to address this market. That's Merck. Merck's obviously a big pharma company. They're developing a drug that targets a receptor in your upper airway that actually works really well. It drops the chronic cough rate by 85%. So it's very good for patients. Unfortunately, it comes paired with a very bad side effect. So this product also inhibits a receptor that you find in your taste buds. So 80% of patients either partially or completely lose their taste. Big issue for patients. Notwithstanding this, Merck acquired this asset from a small biotech company, a private company, that was probably our size. In 2016, they knew about the side effect profile. They paid $1.25 billion, $500 million US upfront. So just to give you an idea of how big this market could be. Our product is differentiated in that it's just as potent at the cough receptor, but it doesn't hit the taste receptor. In animal studies, we've shown that we have the same efficacy as the Merck product head-to-head, and in taste studies where we have no impact on taste, and they have a big impact in taste. So we're really a fast follower program that's coming in behind Merck with a much better profile. We're about to go into the clinic this year, so we'll be in human studies in mid-year. At the beginning, you go into healthy volunteers. This is still very important for us because we'll be able to assess whether there will be taste loss in these healthy volunteers. So we'll have that data by the end of the year, and it'll be a big value driver for us.
Andrew?
Thanks, Eden. So SQI Diagnostics is a diagnostic tools company. As Eden said, we work in the multiplexing world. Fundamentally, that means that we get many results from a single test. And we enable our customers who are both in the pharma drug development space as well as other diagnostic customers to make their testing programs more efficient. And most of the time, not every time, most of the time we deliver a better technical result to them as well. So when you look out into the market, the amount of data that companies need or want or have to, from a regulatory perspective, generate is growing and growing at an exponential rate. So anything you can do to deliver more results at a lower cost is going to be a benefit to them. Over the last couple of years, we've done a pivot. We were developing our own content in the autoimmune space. We still have that content. When I say content, I'm just talking about the different things we test for. So we did a pivot when I took over as CEO, and we focused on near-term, lower regulatory risk opportunities. And that was primarily, we started focusing on pharma companies. We started working with them to customize tests, to test the immunogenic, or on a very non-technical basis, like the allergic response of those patients to the drugs. So we're helping them develop very complex tests in this immunogenicity space, anywhere from 6 different things at a time up to 33 different immunogenicity targets in a single test. So instead of developing 30 different tests, instead of running 30 different tests, mostly on a manual basis, we deliver them a 96-well plate. Each one of those wells can deliver up to 33 different immunogenic results. Now, this kind of testing is nobody in pharma tests because they think it's cool or because the technology is neat. The FDA came out with guidance in 2014 to cause them to do this immunogenicity testing and to expand the amount of the immunogenicity testing that they're doing. And better lucky than smart. We were in the market with this new product about that time, and we got our first big pharma customer. They've done a couple of presentations in the market for us, so that was a bit of a turning point for us. And now, as Eden said, we've got 4 of the 10 biggest pharma companies in the world, or biopharma companies, as customers. I think we're gonna, in the next 6 months, we're gonna add another couple. I don't know that I'll get all 10 or 20 of the biggest, but we're well on our way. And we think 2018 is an inflection year. We leveraged the work we're doing with pharma, and we've picked up some other diagnostic companies as customers. So we're taking their content or their tests that are all singleplex, highly manual, and we're converting them to multiplex testing on our platform. We also sell to pharma and the diagnostic companies a automated analyzer, so completely load and go. You put in our test kit, you put in a couple of reagents, you load a rack of patient samples, and you walk away, and you get up to 7,000 quantified results in a single run. So that machine running 7,000 results would replace 10 or 20 lab benches with lab technicians working 3 to 4 to 5 hours in a row. The economic benefit of that is savings on an annual basis for any one test of millions of dollars. And we also have this little added bonus, certainly in the pharma side, and in a few of our diagnostic customers where our products are technically superior. So mostly this is on the reliability side of the test. They have to throw out fewer tests, and they're more certain of the result. So where we are right now, 2 years ago, I'd still be trying to convince you that this technology is great. Our technology risk is getting as close to zero as you get in this market. We're commercializing products for customers. We're finishing a bunch of validations, and 2018 should be a pretty pivotal year for us in terms of generating revenue. I'd say the bulk of that, or 70% of that revenue, is going to come from the diagnostic side. We're just finishing validation off, knock on wood, this week, next week, with one of our diagnostic customers. They've got a cardiac biomarker assay. It's 7 different markers. They've got an algorithm. They were at the American Cardiac Association conference about a month ago, one product of the year. It's a test that predicts with 80% certainty whether you're going to have a heart attack in the next 5 years. So it's a prospective test for cardiac heart attacks, measuring the amount of plaque formation and the insidiousness of those plaque formations. So we're providing them this multiplex test. They're running patient samples right now in their CLIA lab in California, and they have a pretty decent baseline forecast and are picking up pretty big and noteworthy customers along the way. There are Life Labs in Canada, there are Cleveland Heart Labs in the States, and are picking up some of the bigger reference lab names. So the diagnostic side of our business is, I think, going to drive us into a really nice revenue triple or better compared to last year, this year. So tech risk on the cusp of commercialization, and a bunch of new big pharma and diagnostic customers in our pipeline.
Thank you, Andrew. Cameron?
I'm Cameron Groom, CEO of Microbix Biosystems. Microbix is a TSX-listed company based in Mississauga that has become one of the leading suppliers to the global diagnostics industry. So we grow, purify, and inactivate a broad series of bacteria and viruses that are then called antigens. And these antigens form the biologic core of tests for infectious disease. When they are looking, a physician is looking to know whether you have been exposed to a disease, perhaps have it, and assess your immunity to it, our products are core for those type of medical tests. And we supply tests to supply that antigen material to about 100 different global diagnostics manufacturers, and have a very unique expertise in being able to produce these safely, consistently, and at scale. And we're now selling about $1 million a month of our products to diagnostic customers. And what we're seeing is a shift as the medical tests that have been in widespread use for decades in North America and Western Europe are starting to be adopted in the Asia-Pacific region. So, for example, testing of a pregnant mother to assess her immunity to diseases that could harm her baby, or looking at someone with persistent cough, for example, and instead of just blindly prescribing an antibiotic, as would have been the practice, looking and saying, is that chronic cough? Is that COPD from pollution? Is that a viral infection or a bacterial infection? If so, what? You have to have a diagnostic test to determine that. And what we've been seeing in our business is a upwelling in demand for our products as a result of the beginnings of that adoption of medical testing in these new regions, with billions of new potential patients. And it is resulting in a real shift in the level of demand for these unique antigen products that we make. And what we have done is moving from the traditional, very labor and material intensive culturing technology that Eden alluded to earlier, called roller bottles, where literally you have rooms full of racks of culturing bottles that are slowly turning in a mechanized rack, where technicians have to periodically go and manually unscrew a cap, change the growth media in that culture, put it back in the rack, do it again and again and again over a period as long as a month or more, in the case of a viral antigen, then inoculate those cultured cells with a virus and do it all over again. We've replaced these, in some cases, 1,600 liters of roller bottle capacity with bioreactor technology that we've now validated that can do the same production in far less of the footprint using a bioreactor tower that would fit on this table in front of me with far less labor, far less materials, and much more precision with control of oxygenation, nutrients, temperature, waste streams, and be able to therefore not only expand our capacity massively to meet that new demand, but also reduce our labor and material costs so that we're increasing margins. So from a technical risk point of view, this is something the company's worked on for the past several years. It completed the validation of this technology in the fall, so there is no technical risk. And with the assistance of investors, many of whom are in this room, we have capitalized the company to expand that capacity and have increased it sixfold in order that we can meet that demand and grow our revenues and our business moving forward. So we're thankful for the invitation today, and we'll be happy to participate further in the panel. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Dr. Goldstein.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Elliot Goldstein. First of all, I'd like to thank Eden for setting up this panel. Thank you very much, Eden. Eden kind of told the essence of the story, so maybe I'll just give a few sort of factoids and some highlights around it. My business partner, Eugene Williams, who's based in Boston, he's our executive chairman. We launched the company in 2015. We actually were associated with the company for a year before that, doing very heavy due diligence. I joined the board of the company about a year before we took over management. So I wanted to see what was really the problem with this company that had stunning technology, in our opinion. It was slowly losing value. It used to be called Amorphix. We changed the name in 2015. So we launched the company in 2015. It was market capped at actually about $2 million and had $1 million of invoice debt, not structured debt, did bills that hadn't been paid. Anyway, we raised about $12.5 million in 4 plain vanilla pipes over the ensuing 18 months or so. The last one was September, August this year, 2018. And we've moved our market cap up from basically zero to $150 million. We listed on the OTCQB in the United States on the 2nd of January, so we have hundreds of millions of more eyeballs on the story, and that certainly has contributed to the growth, kind of the lifting of the kimono and actually seeing what we believe is the exquisite science of the company. ProMIS discovers and develops antibody therapies that are highly selective for the toxic misfolded proteins that are now known to be the root cause of various neurodegenerative diseases. The technology we have allows us to address probably 7 or 8 different very serious neurological diseases: Alzheimer's disease, ALS, it's also called Lou Gehrig's disease, frontotemporal dementia, Parkinson's disease, Lewy body dementia, that's what Robin Williams died of. All of these diseases are now known to be driven of a root cause of a misfolded toxic protein, different protein in each disease. Also, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, repetitive head trauma is one of these. It's a protein called tau that drives this disease. So our technology allows us to exclusively identify targets on the misfolded forms of these proteins, not the normal forms, because you don't want to knock out the normal forms. We have a very strong patent fortress. We have 45 patents issued worldwide and 30 pending. We take a big pharma approach to our intellectual property estate. At the end of the day, if you don't own your products, there's no value, and if you can't make them, there's no value. Everything is in between. It's just a lot of hard work. As Woody Allen said, 80% of success is showing up and doing your job. And I think that's absolutely true. So we have this very strong patent fortress, which means that no other company without dealing with us can use our technologies, can address our targets, they belong to us, and our antibodies as well, the composition of matter, the so-called CDR sequences, are all proprietary. The patents have issued about a month or 2 ago across the board worldwide. We're particularly focused now on developing best-in-class therapies exclusively at the time being for Alzheimer's disease. When I joined the company in 2014 as a board member and then ultimately as the president and CEO, and we'll probably maybe talk about this a little later on, but the short form is there's a blessing and a curse with technology, and the better the technology, worse the problem, inability to focus. the technology we have can identify highly exclusive sites on all these different proteins. So at the time we took over the management, the company was working on 6 or 7 different diseases at the same time. Well, imagine if you had, in biotech, the main thing that distinguishes biotech, especially small biotech, from major pharma, is we've got less resource. That's it. That's the difference. We've got to make decisions faster and better. We've got to be more clever. And we've got to be relentlessly focused. That's my mantra. That was my main job. So we're focused exclusively on the world's largest unmet need, which is Alzheimer's disease. So that's, I think, what's really driven our progress, because we've applied the limited resources we have, human and financial, to that disease. All of our research is done under worldwide exclusive license from the University of British Columbia Brain Center. In my opinion, one of the top 3 neuroscience centers in the world. All of the discoveries in the field, i.e. neurodegeneration, are automatically ours under the same terms, unless we refuse them, which means it's very efficient and fast to develop these. We're located, in addition to our resources, obviously at UBC, I'm located in San Francisco. Our executive chairman and most of our development team is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we have a registered office in Toronto with, it's a very small support staff there. I.e., we're in the 2 biotech poles of the universe, and that gives us access to some of the best contractors, the best people to work with, rather than trying to centralize all of that in bricks and mortar somewhere in the middle of North America. So Eden had actually announced that we're targeting a product. We often get the question, why are you guys working in Alzheimer's disease? 20 years of failures of big pharma, billions of dollars spent. I mean, you got to be crazy or just so wealthy you don't care. Well, no, the answer is no. 20 years of human pharmacology. It's very, very successful and helpful now because we know exactly what not to target, what's failed, and what to target. So our product, our lead product, PMN 310, which will be entering the clinic in 2019, targets selectively and exclusively the form of amyloid beta that we now know is a root cause of Alzheimer's disease. It's a toxic, misfolded form that propagates like a prion, begins in the hippocampus where memory stores, progresses to the frontal lobes, and eventually to the back of the brain, and that follows the symptoms of the disease. There's one product, so all these failed trials, there's actually one from Biogen, aducanumab, that Eden mentioned, that will be approved in our opinion, and not only our opinion, but the opinion of all the technical and scientific analysts in the field. On the market side, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Jefferies, JP Morgan, Evaluate Pharmas, all estimate that aducanumab is the most valuable drug in development worldwide today across every indication. Its net present value today is over $10 billion, and it's not even on the market. We're developing a form of antibody that gets around one limit liability that aducanumab has, and that's it targets not only the toxic oligomer, the toxic misfolded form, which is what you want to do, but it also targets plaque. It was originally believed that plaque was a target. Plaque is inert. In fact, even may be beneficial. Every antibody that engages plaque is plagued with an adverse event or side effect called neurovascular edema or brain swelling. It comes from busting up the plaque in and around blood vessels in the brain. That opens up channels, and leakage and even bleeding occurs. Aducanumab is the only drug ever to have shown, from Biogen, ever to have shown, with 3 years follow-up, either arresting or significant slowing of the cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease. It's a true breakthrough in a devastating disease, but it's imperfect. The dose that works is 10 milligrams per kilogram, the patient's body weight, but at that dose, 35 to 55% of the patients have brain swelling and either have to be backed off the drug or can't take the dose. For those who can take it and respond, it's going to be fantastic. But we believe we have a best-in-class approach because our product doesn't target plaque, exclusively the toxic form of amyloid beta. We have very strong reason to believe on the scientific basis we won't have this adverse event, can dose higher, and get more product to the actual target. One question that Eden had asked, and I'll finish with that, well, what's the market opportunity here? Well, this is the largest unmet need in medical science. There's no drug today on the market. Aducanumab is likely to be first. The Alzheimer's Association of the United States in 2013 estimated that the total indirect and direct medical costs of Alzheimer's disease in the US alone, $500 billion, with a B, $500 billion expected to triple over the next 10 to 15 years, $1.5 trillion. Regardless of how good or bad our healthcare systems are, and they're not particularly that good, especially in the states where I live, this will bankrupt our healthcare systems. So it's our duty to find a solution to this problem, and we're working on that diligently. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Robert?
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. And Eden, thank you for the invitation. And we appreciate Next Edge Capital's support of our organization and the kind comments you made about Cipher and where we're going. So I'm Rob Tessarolo. I'm the CEO of Cipher Pharmaceuticals. Cipher has been a publicly traded company since 2004. Started out with 3 products in development, and we were successful in pulling all 3 through development, as well as registering them in the U.S. and the FDA, and then out-licensing them to partners. We had a very successful development in the product called Absorica, which was the application of a Leidos technology to a well-known molecule, isotretinoin. That product is on the market. Absorica right now is on the market in the U.S. It holds somewhere between 20 and 25% market share. It trades somewhere between $400 and $450 million a year in gross sales, and it provides us a really high margin royalty back to Cipher Pharmaceuticals. I think clearly our organization, as we get through this conversation, is a little bit different than the other 4 organizations on stage. I was getting a little worried there when you started talking about microbiology, but we're certainly more focused. Our organization is much more focused on the commercialization and the end stage and getting to market and going to market with our products. I joined as CEO back in April of 2017, and on the way into the organization, with about 22 years of pharmaceutical experience, both in Canada and the U.S., I saw an organization that really was struggling and was about to go through a real transformation. But it was an organization with really tremendous fundamentals, specifically a very high margin royalty business, global licensing business that was spitting back a tremendous amount of cash flow, as well as a Canadian organization that was that could be scaled and had very exciting organic growth ahead. With those 2 fundamentals, it was clear that the organization was going to undergo a transformation, and I thought that professionally it'd be a really great thing to be a part of. Since coming on at Cipher, we've had a very successful 2017. We recorded several good quarters of growth and returning the company to higher level profitabilities, which is what we were setting out to do in our transformation plan. Our focus is now to execute our growth strategy, which has us using our stronger financial footprint, our stronger financial position to execute upon product licenses for the Canadian marketplace, mergers and acquisitions where we see complementary capabilities, but moreover portfolios that we think we can grow, as well as some selective drug delivery or drug development focused more on the portfolios, more on the profile of applying technologies to known molecules versus doing the research in the R&D equation. So we think the future's strong at Cipher, and I'm looking forward to getting into the conversation.
Thank you, Robert. So just to summarize, we've got Roberto at Bellus, who in-licensed from AstraZeneca a P2X3 inhibitor for chronic cough. And he achieved that at a very extraordinary valuation compared to what Merck paid for its similar molecule in phase 2. So there's a valuation gap there. Andrew's company, SQI Diagnostics, has developed an extraordinary multiplexing technology that is able to take big pharma and biopharma samples, and out of that, not just extract the information from one sample, but from multiple samples, up to 33 and eventually up to 100 samples at a time. Extraordinary breakthroughs. Cameron's company, Microbix, is at the cusp of building out a whole new market in verification market and introduced several new products for a market that just emerged over the last year or 2 that adds tremendous value to its client base. And again, it's very different from its reagents market-based, antigen market-based. Dr. Elliot Goldstein's company, ProMIS Neurosciences, was able to find ways to improve upon the existing breakthrough, potentially breakthrough drug from Biogen called aducanumab. It will be the first disease-modifying drug that hits the market in 2020. Well, this little Canadian company has found a way to improve that drug in 2 ways. through what it's targeting in toxic oligomers and targeting IG4 versus IG1. So again, the market has rewarded ProMIS by taking it from under a $5 billion market cap to $150 million market cap. Robert Tessarolo, CEO of Cipher, came in about a year ago. He restructured a struggling company. He was able to reduce the debt and refinance existing debt at a much lower rate. He built out Activist Canada into a $300 million company before it was acquired. So I think the pedigree, and we're actually quite fortunate to have CEOs of this pedigree at this panel today. So our next question is actually going to focus on something that is unique. Each of these CEOs, a key decision that they've had to make along the path, whether with the existing company or with a company prior to, that was very difficult but monumental in changing the path of what they had to do. Because it tells you a lot about the quality of the CEOs that we have in this, that we've assembled today. And so if each gentleman can maybe relate a story, what your thought process was like when you had to make key, perhaps difficult decisions along the way that changed the direction of your company. Roberto?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And I think that maybe what's different from a healthcare CEO compared to a lot of other companies is that we're really dealing with people's lives. And when you look at what I do in terms of developing drugs for high unmet medical needs, you're balancing the needs of many different stakeholders. So of course we have shareholders, and we need to generate positive returns for shareholders. I'd like to highlight you have different kinds of shareholders. You have some shareholders that are more focused on short term, some that are more focused on the long term. But we also have other stakeholders. We have patient associations. We have patients that we have to, talk to and see. And for a lot of these patients, you're working in areas of high unmet medical need. Your project may be the only one that's in development for their disease, maybe one of a small number of projects. So I think for me as a CEO, some of the toughest decisions that I've had to make are really about, when you get down to it, it's mostly about cutting projects, stopping them. Saying, no, we can't take on any more financial risk. No, we can't continue this project any further. Because you know that that's going to hurt a key stakeholder. You know that that's going to hurt patients. You know that that's going to hurt, the patient associations. And so we recently did this with we in-licensed our chronic cough program in February of 2017. And we had a pipeline of other projects that we were also looking at, some of which were partnered, so our partners were going to continue those programs, but one of which that wasn't partnered. It was our responsibility. And we had actually a deal on the table with a small pharma company to pursue that project, but they wanted us to put in 50% of our time and 50% of our effort. And we had to make a very tough decision in terms of balancing our portfolio and focusing. And at the end, we decided we'd rather focus on something that had a higher chance of being successful and really focus on that 100%. And we decided to say no to that partnership. And at the end, that program actually ended up getting stopped. So just an example.
Andrew?
So I think, when I took over as CEO, I've been with the company for a number of years, and we'd been through the ups and downs that biotech companies do. They, the kind of the metric for diagnostic companies is, anywhere from 10 to 15 years and $100 million before you get any kind of real success. So, no problem, everyone. We're well on our way there. We're at about from my experience, about the 14-year mark, $80 million in, and we're now really starting to see the success from the revenue. But when I took over as CEO, I think we did a lot of navel gazing. We also, I inherited a new board about the day after I took over, and when I went into the first meeting with them, I kind of looked around and said, I don't need a lawyer, do I? No. And we'd been contemplating a new strategy, and we'd, a lot of pressure from shareholders. The three key shareholders at SQI now own over 60% of the company. They've been very supportive, but we did have to make some changes to our strategy. And stop investing in the development of the FDA-regulated autoimmune disease multiplex content that we've been working on and pushing through the FDA. I mean, we do have 3 FDA-cleared tests that really gave us a lot of credibility with our next, with the next customer set, which was this pivot. So, you know, you've got a bunch of products, you haven't really got them to market. You're building up a menu that appeals to the large reference testing labs, but you're not quite there yet. You don't have quite enough for them to hit the green button and to buy your products. So, I mean, it's a big leap to just kind of, you know, put on pause. Looks like an abandonment to the outside market of these, you know, what are admittedly high-value multiplexed assays for autoimmune disease, and pivot to pharma. And so the decision's not always straightforward, and the reward isn't always immediate, and you have to ask for even more patience from your shareholders and from your stakeholders. And I think, you know, we really pushed into that pharma market. We made a lot of technical advances in trying to address their needs, because we didn't know that world as well. The pharma speak, the pharma market was a fair bit different. Their needs were different than, say, a reference lab. Even though you think, oh, it's just a diagnostic result. I mean, they're dealing with the regulator in a much more direct and daily basis in terms of, you know, our tests were helping them with the safety profiles of their drugs. And we didn't always give them great answers. It was the right answer, but it wasn't always the answer they wanted. So we helped them get to know faster, which ultimately, as Roberto said, you know, if you can get to know and drop a project is, you know, ultimately not going to have the financial return, that's a good result. So, you know, kind of back to the question. Yeah, I did a lot of navel gazing, tried to look at how our technology could be applied to address the major pressure that we had was to generate revenue. And so we did that, put our IVD autoimmune tests on hold, focused on pharma, improved our technology even more, picked up diagnostic customers along the way and helping them multiplex their novel content. And, you know, fairly soon, Safe Harbor Act invoked, it looks like we have another new diagnostic customer that wants to take our autoimmune FDA-cleared product to market for us. So, I mean, it's all that investment, which really grew the technology and the multiplexing technology that we've got, is, I think, going to hit the market fairly soon in a good partnership with another diagnostic customer. So, I guess, you know, that was at SQI at least the kind of big moment or the pivot point and the learning. And sometimes you just have to kind of, you know, you have to lay your plans and you have to go for it, and don't kind of look backwards too much.
Thank you, Andrew. Cameron?
For Microbix, we've certainly had some decisions that we had to make with regards to focus and really evaluating what are our strengths and what is within our reach and what is beyond our reach. Our company has 75 employees and a big production facility in Mississauga, but the company has had many brilliant ideas coming out of these very talented professionals, and it has been important to decide what is within our core strengths and where do we have credibility with our customers. So with our antigen products that are used by many global diagnostic manufacturers, big multinationals, household names, we have a huge amount of credibility there. The quality products that Eden mentioned, this is assessing, you have a result of a lab test, for example. I get tested and it says, you have influenza A. How do you know that that test worked? How do you know the machine worked? How do you know that the technician ran the test properly? We've moved into this emerging market that is in providing the samples of real killed virus or bacteria that validate for the lab or the lab accreditation organizations that the test was run properly, that the instrument is working properly. And that's becoming a huge area of growth for us on top of our antigen business that is already 10% of our revenues and will grow, I believe, massively over the next few years. We had to decide, do we commit resources to that right in our wheelhouse, or do we go and commit resources in other opportunities? We own the rights to an FDA-approved biologic drug that historically sold $400 million a year. But we have nowhere to make it. To do that with our own resources would cost, to relaunch that drug to its broadest potential indication would be over $100 million. To do it narrowly and very targeted would still cost $30 million and 3 years of time. To do that, we would have to forego the opportunities to pursue in the antigen business that is growing in itself quite rapidly in our quality products business. So where we've had to take a tough decision is to refocus and say, you know what, that product will sell a few $100 million in the US, 80% IRR, but it is not going to be driven with our internal resources. We're going to partner that asset. And tough decisions to do, but that is the kind of tough decision that needs to be made to drive extracting and maximizing value for shareholders and ensuring that we benefit, as Roberto was saying, that we benefit patients. This drug has to get back on the market. It's a clot buster drug, very important for therapy, but it will not be driven with our internal resources. It'll be by partnering, and we will focus on scaling up and maximizing our diagnostics business, both on the antigen supply, where the need is just taking off, and on the emerging need for these quality assurance products as tests get more complex. You could have the best machines out there, but if the operator is not working properly or the maintenance is not there, how do you know they're working? So we're operating on that basis, and I like to quote to people, Scrooge McDuck, Donald's uncle. And the quote I like to say is, Donald, you have to work smarter, not harder. We have a whole bunch of very talented professionals in all our industries, but the tough decisions are to say, how do we work smarter? Because we're all working as hard as we can. So that would be the message I would leave behind.
Thank you, Cameron. Dr. Goldstein?
Thanks, Eden. We faced, on the day we launched the company in 2015, two major challenger obstacles. One was behavioral and one was structural. The behavioral problem was what Roberto talked about. What do you do? What do you focus on? The real simple way to envisage it and kind of humanize the problem is, I spoke to the research team and said, listen, you have a family of 6 children and you only have enough money to feed one, what do? Do you kind of starve all 6, or do you disadvantage one? No, start with one first. Have one child, take care of him or her, and go to the next. The reason why that's sort of anathema in pharmaceutical drug development, we've all learned and we all know, if you place 10 or 20 bets, one of them will make it to market. Only 1 in 4 will be profitable, by the way. People forget that side. But that's kind of the general math. So have a broad portfolio in your company, invest in a broad portfolio, and you'll hit a winner. But you don't have the resources to do that, so you just can't go down that avenue. So I agree with you, Roberto. That's a behavioral challenge to get the mindset of the company focused, because researchers will do what they want, regardless of what you tell them to do, unless they understand why it's survival. The structural challenge was much different. I think it gets to a different question that Eden had raised with us. I've worked in half a dozen European companies in the United States. Actually, the first time I've worked in a Canadian company, even though I'm a Canadian citizen, which I'm proud of, by the way. At the time we were talking, I joined the board and we were looking at the technology. We were really just absolutely impressed with the technology. Most of our colleagues, advisors, venture capitalists we were speaking to in the US said, just close the thing down, take it private. You know, it's preclinical, the TSX is too small, et cetera, et cetera. And we hesitated on that quite a lot. What we did do is we decided to keep the public face of the company. There were several reasons for that, but the main reason was we're just ethical guys, and excuse my English, we didn't want to screw the existing shareholders. The second reason, if it had gone into receivership, we might have spent 3 years trying to get our hands on the intellectual property. Actually, what we did is we loaned, 3 of us directors loaned the company $100,000 so we could have an annual general meeting so we could ask the shareholders to allow us to raise more money to save the company. We asset-backed that loan with the intellectual property, because if it did go south, we would have owned all this exciting technology. Of course, we gave it back to the company and the loan was repaid and all that. But that structural decision was monumentally difficult. But we played it to the long term, and we said, if this science is real, and we believe it really is, we can make this work in a public company, and we also saw advantages to the public side as well, but they weren't apparent at first. So that was a very, very tough decision, and we were never completely comfortable with it because I was, well, what if we went the other way? Yeah. Well, maybe somebody else will do that for us and explain. But that was the toughest decision we had to make because it didn't just involve ourselves, the future of the company, but thousands of shareholders who were waiting on that decision.
As a beneficiary of a 20-fold return, thank you, Dr. Goldstein, for not shutting the company down.
So Eden was threatening us, but that's a different side.
Very good. Very good. So, yeah, so it's a great question. With regards to coming into Cipher, and as I've already articulated, a transformation plan was really required. Really, the key decision in the last 12 months has really been the pace and the cadence of change. We haven't had the luxury of sort of picking the decisions we had to make. It's in the last 12 months we knew that we had to make a tremendous number of decisions to really transform the organization. And when we look back 9 months later, we've improved our operations substantially. We've jettisoned a U.S. business that was probably trading $10 million a year in revenue and costing about $25 million of direct OPEX to keep the doors open. We restructured the resultant company that in a way that was commensurate with the continuing operations. If you're not going to have a footprint in the U.S., your G&A needs to come down, and you need to be responsible with respect to the type of company how you're going to behave moving forward. We needed to attract a tremendous amount of new capabilities and talented management to the organization, which meant making the unpleasant at time decisions and sort of difficult decisions around people. Because when you look and you say this is the new aspiration for growth that we have at this company, and we don't have the capabilities and the people to get there, there has to be a lot of turnover. And when I come back to my original comment about the decision around the pace, we really, myself and the CFO, Stephen Lemieux, who was there before I got to the organization, had just come on board, we sat down and said, can we really plod through this for the next 18 months to get to the point where we then start trying to execute the new strategy? And the decision point was no, we need to move quickly, swiftly, emphatically, definitively, and get back to the business that we saw for Cipher to be a differentiated growth story, which is one focused on commercialization, going to market, scaling, stealing share, winning against our competitors. And like I say, 9 months later, having restructured the organization, got rid of the U.S. business, brought new management to the organization, rationalized our pipeline. We had a pipeline that in the last 36 months had sort of grown, really irresponsibly. We probably were $200 or $300 million away from inflection points, in that portfolio, and lots of it was preclinical, early stage, pre-phase 2, stuff that a company like Cipher has no business being involved with. So rationalizing the pipeline, at the same time, restructuring our debt facility. I think you articulated that. We came into the calendar year 17 with $40 million debt at a 10.25% coupon. Today we enjoy a $20 million facility refied with CIBC, so one of the big 5 banks in Canada, interest rate under 3%, an accordion feature to allow us to continue to grow. And so all of that's been done, as I say, in 9 months since coming to the organization. And that really, we're really, I think, proud and we're boastful about where we're at. And it has to do with us making a very conscious decision to go as fast as possible. I would say, and you brought it up, so I'll play it up a little bit, but I will say that prior to coming to Cipher, I was part of a company called Cipher Pharmaceuticals, and I was at Actavis over the period of 5 years, where Actavis went on a real buying spree, and it was a buying spree that was not necessarily akin to some of those business models you were describing, where we were simply chasing earnings. Quite differently than that, we were chasing good product portfolios that we thought would be better off in our hands. And I was the Canadian affiliate president and general manager and responsible for integrating those companies. The purchase of Actavis, because we were Watson to begin with, purchase of Actavis, purchase of Warner Chilcott, purchase of Forest Laboratories, purchase of Allergan. And in all those instances, it was made very, very clear to me through the results of our integrations that the faster you can go and the more swiftly you can make the decisions that you need to make to get to the company that you want to be to result from the integration, the better off you'll be. And that was what we did here at Cipher.
Thank you, Robert. Our final question to each of the CEOs, our esteemed CEOs that we're fortunate to hear from today is, what are your goals and what do you look forward to over the next year, and what can investors look forward to over the next year?
Yeah, so very quickly, and I think I mentioned it earlier on, this year's a big year for us. We're moving into clinical studies with our chronic cough program. We'll be starting that study in Q3, getting the results in Q4. It's a big deal for us because our key differentiating factor versus the Merck product is a side effect, and so we'll be looking for that in the phase 1 study. So that'll be a big value inflection point for shareholders.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, pretty straightforward for SQI. We're going to continue to push our commercialization path upwards. We're going to generate a lot more revenue than we've had in our last fiscal year. Get our customers' products to them, the ones that are finishing validation, so selling thousands and thousands of kits to our customers, and adding more customers to the pipeline.
Thank you, Andrew.
Very good. For Microbix, we're literally in the midst of reallocating space within our facility and drastically expanding our capacity for producing some key products. So we've been, for example, doubling the power supply to our factory in order to be able to meet the downstream processing needs, and massively increasing our ability to produce antigen biomass. So this will not impact immediately. This will start to come fully on stream in terms of both the revenue top line impact and the impact on gross margins, and of course bottom line as we conclude the fiscal 2018 year. We have a September 30 fiscal year end. So we'll see, I believe, double-digit growth in 2018, but we will see the full beneficial impact of the changes we're making in the 2019 fiscal year, starting in the first quarter of that year. So that's what we're looking for, and presuming we live in a rational universe, that should be positively impacted in our share price at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Dr. Goldstein?
Yeah, thank you. I think ourselves, as well as our shareholders, are looking forward to uplisting to the main NASDAQ middle second half of 28 of this year. We're more focused on creating value than the actual timing of that, which obviously makes sense. That's a major upcoming activity. We're reaching out to U.S. banks and funds at this stage. In terms of our portfolio and program, we're now initiating all of the manufacturing, cell line development, all those sort of technical complexities that have been reduced to practice, nevertheless necessary, in advance of entering the clinic in 2019 with our lead program. And finally, all of our research is no longer on amyloid beta and Alzheimer's because we finished it. We're in development in Alzheimer's. We're now working in Parkinson's disease and ALS, and hoping to have a major deal with pharma on those sometime in the coming 12 months or so if we're successful.
Thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Robert?
Thanks. Yeah, so I'll wrap it up, and I appreciate the question. It's always important to let investors know how we're seeing our organization over the next 12 to 18 months. So clearly, I think our cleanup is done. The overhang for our organization in terms of writing red ink and sort of having unprofitable segments is behind us. We come into 18 armed with a good amount of cash in our books, a great debt facility with cheap cost of capital, lots more cash spitting off and generating cash flow positive on a quarterly basis. And I think the most important thing, what we're going to see next is the results of our business development investment. We've invested a tremendous amount of resources and effort. Upwards of 70% of my time is invested in business development. Our CFO is about 50% of the time, and we've got a whole business development team that we've invested in and built to generate great leads and deal flow that we can act upon with the resources, the capital that we have. And we've got tremendous engagement in the marketplaces from partners. They see us as a real trusted product steward, given our rich history of commercial returns. And we are very, very confident that we're going to transact aggressively this year and begin to sort of build the story for what's next for Cipher in terms of how we emerge after our restructuring.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you very much to our audience I think you have benefited tremendously from getting access to these CEOs. We realize that in the marketplace there are other hot sectors that are catching the headlines right now. But these are amazing companies doing amazing things, and they are available at incredible valuations. And so perhaps you can factor that into your decision making going forward. I know I own all these companies in my fund, And I think that the long-term prospects for these companies are exceptional. And healthcare biotech being what it is, there tends to be an asymmetric payoff to these companies. There are companies with high failure rates and high returns and so on, but I think the companies that we have on our panel today are an extraordinary pedigree of companies that offer great long-term returns at a favorable risk reward. I thank you very much for attending, and I thank you very much to our panel for being here.